So, hello guys, who all are here? Let me see. I think 57 people have joined us. Hi guys, I'm Nandini. How are you all? I hope you all are sound and safe and very much, the AMA that you all are waiting for. So, Nasreen is here and we are pretty much excited here. So, I think, yeah, people are joining, more people are joining in. So, guys, before we start, let me. So I'm Nandini. I'm your host for today's AMA. How to start a creative business and build a brand in pattern designing. So let's start. And I just wanted to say thank you first of all to Nasreen, for doing this, for joining us today. And I'm sure most of you must be, quarantined or staying at home. So Princho by Designhill is back again with a new AMA on how to start a creative business and build a brand with very talented Nasrin Jafri. So I hope you guys all know about her already, and you must have seen her Instagram and everything. And she's got great work. So Nasreen has studied at New York University and is a founder at Mixed, which is one woman textile brand and design studio. And she funded the company with her own money, run everything from pattern design, textile curation, product design, and sales and marketing too. So, to date, Mixed has had the honor of serving over thousands of customers and earning nearly thousands in sales. So, over to you, Nasreen. Please give us a brief about yourself. We are so much excited to have you here.
Hey, all right, I was just looking at the chat and it seems like people are coming from all around the world. I see India, Malaysia, Trinidad, Tobago, amazing. So I'm based in New York. Right now, I'm actually in Massachusetts because I'm quarantining. But yeah, so my name is Nasrin Jafri. A little bit about myself. We'll start on a personal note and then we'll get into the design stuff. I'm half Japanese and half Iranian. My parents met in Los Angeles in the 70s, I think. My dad was a cab driver when he first came to the US from Iran, and my mom ended up being his passenger in his cab, and that's how they met. And yeah, and then that's kind of like my cultural roots, and my mixedness being Japanese and Iranian is a lot of what inspired the brand and kind of led me towards creating this textile studio. So Mixed is a textile brand that I design and that I run, and it's meant to bring out every side, every part of you, and allow people, both men and women, to be all of them, and to allow their mixedness to really shine and be shown off to the world. So I'm a self-taught designer. I started with graphic design. I did some print design and illustration work early on. I did client work, and over the past couple months, I kind of started stumbling into textile design. I thought it was really interesting. And I kind of just took this leap. Like Nandini said, I took my own money and invested it to start this brand and start this company. The launch has been, I think, really successful. I'm really happy with it. I've served over 200 customers, and I think we just passed about 5,000 in sales. So I'm really excited to talk with you all today, answer your questions. I just want to get right to it so I can provide as much value as I can. And yeah, let's get started. So hi, New York City, yay.
So that's great to hear. And see, as we can see, people are joining from all around the world, and they are pretty much excited to learn from you. So as you said, it takes a lot of courage to start a business, and especially in an artistic field, I think. So what strike you, Nasreen, and how did you get the courage to start? You thought of starting your own company and doing everything on your own.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I actually wasn't really planning on developing this brand or building a business. When I started with textile production, it was kind of just for fun. Like I mentioned, I was doing graphic design before, but I kind of wanted something I could really touch. Graphic design and illustration, often it stays on the screen and on computers and it's digital. And I just wanted something physical. And so I decided to produce some textiles one day. I really liked the way it felt. I liked the way it looked. It was easy enough to do because, there's another company that's just printing my designs on different fabrics. And then from there, I kind of decided to start why not? Let me just sell a couple things. Let me just put it out there and see how people react. And for me, a lot of it came from just curiosity and wanting to have fun with it and really enjoying the process and not actually putting the pressure on myself to start a business or make it a brand or make it a thing. It was something that I really was excited to do. And it organically kind of grew and it developed. And the excitement I felt from the community is really what made me develop the brand more seriously. So it definitely started as just a personal like interest.
That's very much, interesting and courageous to, listen. But yeah, it takes a lot of guts to do that. So great that it turned pretty much great out there, and that is why I think more people are, keen towards learning that inspiration you are. So moving on to our next question, I've seen your work. Your designs are very vibrant. You do such great work. So where does the inspiration for your work comes from?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I get it often. It comes everywhere, So sometimes it comes from like travels or nature, or I have a lot of kind of like nature themes in my patterns. Sometimes it's just being outside, or even seeing another clothing brand and loving the color palette that they're using. And what I do is I really try to study what I like. So for me, it's not enough to just look at something and like it and kind of just replicate it, but understand what is it about this piece that I like. Is it the colors? Is it the texture? Is it the kind of like a composition? And once I figure out those elements of what makes a piece that I like, then I use those elements in my next piece. And so in that way, it's like I can pull inspiration from other places, but still make my work my own and make it unique.
Yeah, that's very true that you like you said. So moving on to another question from your previous answer only, you said the other company was using your design. So I think Shubhi in the question section has a question. How do you deal with plagiarism? Like when we see a lot of incidences that other artists copy your work, or the companies do that and they don't give due credit. So yeah, how do you deal with that?
That's a good question. No, I haven't actually experienced that yet. I'm not sure if it's happened. Maybe it has. Um, I think from what I see in kind of at least the fashion industry and the clothing industry, everyone's ideas are pretty much stolen, and everything's kind of a knockoff and everything looks the same. I try not to put my energy in worrying about what other people are taking from me, and I kind of just try to create my most original work. And I find that even if somebody else creates something that's similar to me, it's not really going to have the same soul. It's not going to have the same character. And it's likely not going to do as well if it's not authentic to that person. And so I personally haven't experienced it, but I also don't spend too much of my time worrying about it right now.
So yeah, that's another great approach towards it, and how to deal with such incidences. So then I think there's one more question from Stella. Do you think it's worth to spend the money to start a website to market your product?
Awesome. Hey, Estelle, thank you for the question. It really depends. So I think it depends on what your goal is. I found that spending my own money to start my website and market my products has been completely worth it. In terms, let me just give you some hard numbers. So I use Squarespace. It's a really great e-commerce platform. I know a lot of people use Shopify. Shopify's a little bit more robust. I chose Squarespace because it really has beautiful design. It's really easy to use, very user-friendly, and it also has a great e-commerce platform. A little tip or insider, to save money on Squarespace, if you have a student ID, or not a student email, and you sign up with Squarespace with your student email, you'll actually get 50% off your yearly subscription for the first year, which is a really great deal. So you could actually start your website on Squarespace for $75, I think, for the whole year, which I think is a really great investment. At $75, like to be able to kind of put your products online, give them a presence, make them feel legitimate. I think it's totally worth it. Marketing doesn't always have to be expensive. It's a lot of effort. You have to create a lot of graphics, create a lot of copy, think about the ideas behind what you're selling. But yeah, I think it's totally worth it. It depends on what you want to do. If it's, if you're really trying to make sales, or if you just want to have an online presence. And the last thing I'll add to that is I do actually think, even if you don't want to sell anything, having an online presence really legitimizes your craft, right? If you're a designer and a client wants to hire you, they're probably going to find you through social media, but they're going to do some more vetting, and they're probably going to see if you have a website that they can refer to, just to make sure that you're like serious and professional. So I would make the investment personally.
So yeah, that's really great, and I think thank you for sharing it, because and the insider tip was really great. Like, you guys can save a lot of money, and you can use it in your marketing. Your company. So moving on to next question, I have one question. So we see every now and then a lot of beginners and budding artists comes into the textile designing and print designing. So my question is, what do you suggest for them? How should they begin, and what should be their focus, or any do's and don'ts for them?
Yeah. So if anyone is new to design, I totally feel you. I actually only started designing 1 year ago, literally like just started learning about graphic design last year. And I mentioned I'm self-taught, didn't go to school, learned via YouTube. And the thing that I get this question a lot, like, how do I start? And you just do it. That's really, what you just do it, but here are the actual steps. So I use Procreate. I create an illustration or a pattern on Procreate. You can also use Illustrator with the Wacom, or however you want to do it. Once you have your digital image or your pattern or illustration created, you would then send that pattern to a textile production company. And so this step is a little bit more, there's just more, it's a little more tricky. You got to do your research. I use a company called Contrado, Contrado, Contrado. And basically it's very simple. I use them because they have over 100 fabrics. They have a really good website platform where you can upload your design and choose your fabric, and then essentially just, submit that, pay for the order, and then they ship you the printed fabric. In fact, I actually got an order today. I can maybe show you guys. But yeah, so if you have a digital illustration or a pattern already created, I would suggest that you just take that image, send it to a textile design production company, have them ship you the finalized fabric, just so you can experience what it's like to see your designs on a physical product. That's how I started. I started with just producing like a linen towel. There was no purpose for it other than that I just wanted to try it and see how it felt. I really liked it, and so that's how I continued doing it.
So that's a great advice, and yeah, you're very true on these grounds. So moving on to next question, I think Priyansh has one question. What are the prominent marketing techniques you use to target your style of work in your particular selected niche, and how to reach out to them and make them your sustainable client?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let me clarify something, that marketing and sales are two very different things. And I think a lot of times people confuse those two. People think that marketing is, hey, I just came out with this new scarf, for example. Go buy it. There's a link in my bio. That's actually not marketing. That's you trying to get a sale. And so what I try to do when marketing is really just interaction. It's talking to people. It's making them aware of your brand. So for me, if you look at my Instagram and my posts, I often don't, push people to buy product. I'm not sending them to my shop. I'm just talking about my brand values. I talk about the product sometimes to tell you about the color or the feel. And then I just have conversations with people about their life, about their work and their art. And that interaction is really what creates trust and, what makes people want to support you and potentially buy from you. And so that's really how I go about it. Marketing is really about interacting. A lot of people think that social media is kind of the vehicle to sales. And so they treat it in a really salesy approach. And my suggestion is to treat social media like a community. Develop your community on it. Be an honest, interactor. And then once you build a community of people who trust you, who like you, want to support you, then they're going to be much more willing to buy your product.
Yeah, that's very realistic actually. So the answers that you said, so that moves me to my next question, which is like you know how do you find potential companies to work with, and before one starts to contact the companies on their list, what is the list of things one should consider beforehand?
Before contacting a client.
Yeah.
So I actually don't contact clients. That's not the way that I prefer to go, and here's why. So I feel like if I'm approaching a client, it puts me in a disadvantaged position because it makes it seem like I need their work, or that they can maybe take advantage of me and not pay me as much. So what I really like to do is have clients come to me. And so the question is, how do you do that? So so my experience has been that it's really all about three things. And those three things are, you have to have a portfolio that people like, first and foremost, because if people don't like or resonate with your work, I shouldn't say like, if they don't think that your work aligns with their brand or their needs, then they're not going to, ask you to work for them. Two, you have to have really great relationships with the people around you, and those people need to trust you and also like your work. And three, you need to be publicizing and talking about your work to make people aware. So let me talk a little bit more about that. Basically, when I started design, like I said, totally new last June, no design experience in the past. I started working on my own pieces just for fun. I started putting them out there on Facebook. I literally didn't even have an Instagram before June. I'm not an Instagram kind of person. So I was posting like my early designs on Facebook. My friends started seeing them. They liked it. They were, they started to become aware that I was doing design. And now my friends were people they'd like work in consulting or banking or, all these different professional industries. And so as soon as I started posting my stuff on Facebook, I got on their radar. And I got on their radar, but on top of that, we had a really good relationship, and they trusted me and they liked me and they wanted to support me. And so when their bosses and their businesses ended up needing a designer, they immediately thought of me and they recommended me to their boss. And that's how I got pretty much all of my work. So as a designer, what you need to do, especially if you're starting out, is you need to show your work. Don't be nervous about what people think. You got to put it out there. It's going to help you grow and kind of get over that fear. And then two, you really got to have good relationships with the people around you, stay in contact with them, be kind, be authentic. And once you have those two things, then you'll find that those people will start referring clients to you.
Yeah, that was really great tips that you told us. I hope you all guys are enjoying, and you can always ask your questions in the questions tab, and we will be keeping your taking your questions. So before we move ahead, I have one more question, Nasreen. Like, how to establish your pattern making process from an idea to product, and what's your creative process like?
Yeah, so it starts for me. I use the iPad and Procreate with the Apple Pencil. So I might have an idea that, I really like. There's this flower called a pansy that I really like. I would see them like in New York on the streets. They have these really beautiful colors and cool petals. And so that might be where an idea starts, for example. Then I go to my iPad, I open Procreate, I start drawing, I create the pattern. It takes me, several hours to a day to create it. Once that pattern is created in Procreate, I export it as a JPEG. And then again, I use Contrado. So I go onto Contrado's website. I'll choose what kind of fabric I want. So it depends on the product. Am I making a scrunchie? Am I making a scarf? Am I making a towel? And, I choose the appropriate fabric for the product. I then place my pattern onto the product or onto that fabric, digitally, of course, and then pretty much just submit my order, and Contrado essentially prints my pattern onto that fabric. one extra thing to think about is depending on the product you want to create, your pattern is going to be influenced by that. So right now I'm actually wearing one of Mixed's banana scarves. And when I create a scarf, so actually here, I can show you. If you see, like, you can't actually necessarily see bananas, right? You see different colors and you see different patterns, and that's what ends up looking really good on a scarf. Also, the trim of a scarf is really important because you can see the bottoms that hang out. And so when you're designing something like a scarf, you want to make sure that the trim and the edges are nice, they're pretty, they're ornamental because they're going to be seen. I like to use a lot of different colors because eventually they're going to kind of blend together. You're not going to see the image exactly. And so yeah, you have to, if you know what product you want to create beforehand, that should influence the type of pattern that you create.
That's really, something, and very much interesting and very much, insightful to, know that how a pattern, looks onto a product. That's also a very keen thing to know before you start it. So guys, I hope you all are taking notes. So moving on to next question, I think Katerina has one question. Do you have different prices for your prints, and what factors do they depend on?
So I don't sell, well, if you're talking about like licensing patterns, I license my patterns uniformly. But when it comes to product, so if you go on there's in my Instagram, the link in my bio has a link to my shop, which is mixedbynasrin.com, sorry. And you'll see that I have different price points. It really depends. So there are a couple things you have to consider is how much are people willing to spend for your product? And then what is the market that you're in? What are the other prices that are in that market and in that range? So my scarves, the one that I'm wearing, these sell for $50. The way I chose that was I have an idea of who my target demographic is. And I checked Urban Outfitters, I checked Anthropologie, I checked Free People, I checked these kind of big brands that are in the vicinity of where I want to be placed. I look at their prices, and then I kind of price competitively. So the way I think about it is I want to be in between Urban Outfitters and Anthropologie. Urban Outfitters is like a very young kind of like streetwear brand, and Anthropologie is a little bit 35 to 40, year old women. So I want to be right in between there, and I want to offer a price point that's right in between those stores. So that's how I came up with my price point. It really depends. Selling a pattern is very different than selling a product. So you have to just be contextual to the market that you're in.
Yeah,
And
that's
sorry.
yeah.
And also play around with your price. You might find like there's oh my god, my masks. I sell face masks, and I sold my first batch at $5 each because I was kind of like, I just want to put it out there. I just want to break even, and they went like so quick. And so basically from there I was like, okay, if people are going to buy this at $5 super quickly, then I could probably raise the price. I raised it then to $8, still went by super quick. Then I raised it to 10. And this is where I've kept it at. And so I tested the market, and people weren't mad about it. Like, people really understood. And in fact, a lot of people told me, hey, Nasrin, you shouldn't sell your masks at $5. That's too cheap. You should raise your prices. So play around with it. You're not going to get it right the first time. And yeah.
So that's pretty much insightful, and as you told us, I think that answers to Sandhya's answer as well. She asked us, as a beginner in design, how much should we start selling a design for? What's the basic minimum amount? So I think, yeah, just play around it and get to know your niche. Just be out there and just explore. I think, like you said.
Yeah.
So, moving on to our next question. Do you want to take any question from the questions tab? You can have a look at it. Yeah.
Okay. Let me read them for 2 seconds. Okay. So Adia, I hope I said your name right. Adia Taling. She asked, start the live answer. How to cope up with competition and make sure that you stay in the race. So I think that this is something a lot of designers and artists feel. There's a lot of pressure to have a presence on social media every day, and you feel like you're competing with other people and stuff like that. Here's my approach. So I actually really don't look at other people's work too often. I don't really compare myself too often. What I do is I look at designers I love, and I look at designers I aspire to be like, and I try to, be like them and be on their level. But I don't think of them as competition. And I don't think of you guys as competition. And basically, my kind of perspective on the world and business is that the world is abundant. There are so many people on this planet who you can share your work with. And I don't think that we are necessarily competing for all of that. So when you're worried about competition and what other people are doing, it really takes a lot of energy away from your own craft and your own process. So what I would do, what I would suggest, and what I do personally is really just focus on my own lane, and work on my own process, try to get better than I used to be yesterday. I'm not comparing my patterns to someone else's patterns. I'm comparing my patterns to the patterns I created last month and the month before that. And if I'm improving myself, then that's all that really matters, and that's all that I'm really in control of. So try not to think about competition as much. Find artists and designers who are going to really support you, give you shout outs, things like that, to kind of keep you going. Because I know social media and putting out stuff every day is tiring. I get tired. There are days I don't post, and that's normal. So as long as you're going for the long term, you're going to be good.
So that's great. So moving on to next question is I have about tools, because a lot of artists ask this, what tools do you recommend, once any artist is starting out in the industry?
Yeah, so definitely, I mean, depends what you want to do. If you want to work in print, if you want to do illustration, let me go into all of those. So if you want to do graphic design, let's say like social media marketing type stuff, graphics for businesses, I would use Adobe Illustrator. Adobe programs in general are a must, in my opinion. It's so powerful. There's a different range of products. Another little insider tip is, if you use a school, like a student, or if you're a teacher, email, you get a really great discount. So I think for me, it was like the first year I bought it was $20 for a month for every Adobe Creative Cloud app. And that is InDesign, Illustrator, Photoshop, After Effects. It's crazy how much you can do in Adobe programs. So I would get that. If you want to work in graphic design, I would use Illustrator and Photoshop probably. If you want to do print, meaning like, books or magazines or posters, InDesign is a good one, or is the standard. If you want to do illustration, I really recommend actually having a stylus or something you can, draw with by hand. So you can do Procreate and the Apple Pencil. Procreate is a $5 or $10 one-time purchase app. The only expensive part is the actual iPad and the Apple Pencil. You can also use the Wacom and hook up your Wacom to your laptop and use the Adobe programs with the Wacom stylus. It really just depends on what kind of feel you like and what program you prefer. Another big thing is, if you're doing illustration, vector, being able to use vector in Adobe Illustrator is going to be really handy, because then you can scale your images and your work up and down without losing quality. Whereas if you're working in Photoshop or Procreate, it's something called raster. And so if you want to blow your images up, they're going to start getting pixelated at a certain point. But yeah, I hope that answered your questions. Also, books are really great. You can Google them. And I think there's one book I started off with. Sorry, I'm answering this in a long way. It's called Oh Shit, Now What? Oh Shit, Now What? Which is basically like a really fun, really cool designed book that talks about, like, for people who are just starting out in the design industry, it's like, oh shit, now what do I do? So it kind of talks about client work and portfolio and stuff like that in a really fun and personal way. So I would recommend that book.
So that's I don't know what to say, because it's very great. It's going great. People are loving it, and thank you so much for all the insider tips that you're sharing. It's very great, and I want to read a message to you. There's a message from Isen. I think this is so refreshing, Nasreen. There are so many people out there who are scared to share anything because they think you will take from them. But I'm joining as I want to start selling my drawings and prints. So hearing all this is super useful. So people are really loving this generosity of yours that you're sharing it, open-heartedly. So kudos to that. And moving on to our next question is, so a lot of people are asking, about sizes and resolutions of your patterns. And there's one more question if by Elona is, what is the difference between seamless patterns and digital papers? Does digital papers are always seamless? Yeah, you can see that.
Can you, Iona? I think that's how you say your name. Really pretty name. Can you maybe clarify what digital papers are and seamless patterns?
Yeah.
We can get back to that one if you can clarify it.
Okay, so Ilona, if you hear us, just give us a brief about what are digital papers because we don't get it. I think there's a new terminology in the industry. So let's talk about the sizes and resolutions of your patterns because I think 3 or 4 people have asked about it. So if you could just put some light on over this topic.
Yeah. So it depends on what you're designing. And so for me, a lot when I started doing patterns, it was just purely for Instagram and it just stayed digital. And because of that, I just did a square. I did like 2048 by 2048. Standard for Instagram is 1080 by 1080. So I went a little bit bigger just so that, the quality wouldn't be poor. And yeah, I used a square. And again, it's all about context. So I used a square because it was for Instagram. When I make a scarf, I also do a square pattern because the scarf is going to be a square. If I'm going to make a towel, for example, and I want that towel to be rectangular, then my artboard is going to be rectangular. So it really depends on what you're creating.
That's great. I think you guys got the point of it. And moving on to next question is, so some people are asking, there are 2 questions that I've read. So you design your own, designs, and then people are asking, do you also make the masks or scarves or products, or do you outsource?
Yeah, so everything at www.mixedbynasrin.com is designed and created by me. So what I mean by that is I create all the patterns and place them on, let me go back. I create the pattern, step 1. Then I do fabric curation. And so here's a really important tip for people who want to go into textile production. When you find a manufacturer or a production facility, I have a couple, but what I start with is doing fabric samples. Oh, I wish I had them right next to me. I don't. But basically, if you ask the company for fabric samples, they'll send you a bunch of different fabrics that are. In fact, I'm gonna get them and just move my laptop. They'll send you a bunch of different fabrics that you can like touch and feel, and just that way you can understand like what fabric might be good for your project. And then from there, what I do is once I know what fabric I'm going to do, I then send the design to the production company. And I'm sorry, I'm getting off sidetrack because I'm not a good multitasker. Let me put this down.
So I think you guys are very lucky because she got all the way to her next room and bring the fabrics for you. So
okay,
that's very great.
Let me start over. What was the question? What was the question?
So the question was, you were talking about your products, so outsourcing. So you were telling the process, like first you build your pattern and designs, and then you choose the fabrics, the manufacturers provide you.
Perfect. Okay, we're going in here. So I start with the design, and then what I do is I curate the fabric. So this is a really important step because you need to understand what kind of fabric you want to use for a project. If you're making a scarf, you don't want it to be thick, you don't want it to be rough, right? You want it to be soft, silky, satin, etc. So basically what I do is I get a bunch of fabric samples. So these are all samples, not my designs, just samples that the company sends me. And they put prints on it because they want to show me how certain colors show up on fabrics. I like to touch it, I feel it. There are labels to tell me what kind of fabric this is. This is like a satin chiffon, right? So I look through all these fabrics, feel them, I see which one I want, and once I choose what fabric I want, I then tell the production company, hey, I want this pattern or this image produced on, silk satin, and boom. So then they then produce that image on that fabric, and then they send it back to me. So one manufacturer I work with to produce my silk scarves, they're actually printing the scarves, and they actually hem it for me, which is really helpful. And then so when they ship back to me, I just get these finished products that I can then sell. From other companies, I just get raw fabric and I sew it myself. So all my face masks are handmade and hand sewn. And yeah, so it really just depends on the product. For me, what I'm trying to go down the route of doing more so is having the manufacturer actually do the sewing for me, because it just takes too much time if I'm going to do it. But I hope that answered your question. They're fabric samples though. They're really helpful, and they're kind of fun, so it might excite you enough to start producing.
So yeah, they're super cute, and thanks so much for going all the way to do this for all of us. So moving on to next question, which is kind of very much a hot topic. So it's like I think Estelle is asking again. Please tell us about the process of licensing your designs.
Yeah. So basically, with licensing my patterns, I like. Some clients will ask because they want to use the pattern for branding or packaging design. I just recently started with patterns, so I set my prices right now. If I have a pre-existing pattern that someone wants to use, I sell it for $500. I license it for $500, and basically what that process looks like is just a contract that explains all the details of this license, how they can use it, who owns the rights, and where they can use it, where they cannot use it, and I make sure that they sign it. That way we're just kind of bound by this contract, so that I make sure that my pattern isn't being used for purposes it's not supposed to be used for. So if it's a pre-existing pattern, I sell for $500. If I'm going to make a new pattern, I do it for $1,000. And this is, when I first started in graphic design last month, I would do a logo for like $100. And because, I was just starting. I didn't have any kind of credibility. Now I do logo and branding starting at $1,000. And so that's kind of just, I know it's not directly answering the question, but if you're starting out, start, at a place that makes sense for a beginning designer, and then you can always raise your prices as you go.
Yeah, that's insightful. So I think getting back to the Iliona's questions about digital papers. So I think she meant digital papers, which are they sell on Etsy for scrapbooks and all.
Okay.
Yeah. So the question was actually it's what is digital papers? Is it also seamless patterns? I saw a lot of digital papers for scrapbook on Etsy and Creative Market.
I actually don't even know what that is, to be honest. What it sounds like is, or what I think it is basically paper, like a special paper that has a pattern printed on it that people could use for their like scrapbooking process. I'm not sure if there's.
Yeah, so I think her question is, are digital papers the pattern which is printed on it? Is it also a seamless pattern?
Like a repeat pattern?
Okay, so I think Yana got your answer. It's a repeat pattern. So thank you, Nasrin. And moving on to the next question. Do you want to take any question from the questions tab?
Yeah. So licensing. People are asking where I get my ship my product from, or where I produce textiles. A couple of different places. So I use Contrado right now, which I've mentioned before. They're based in the UK, actually. I use them because they have a lot of different fabric selection, over 100. They have a good platform where I can submit my orders. I also have another international manufacturer that's based in China. Our relationship is a little different. It's all via email. That's how we talk. It's not like Contrado, where I can upload my image to the website. You know, this manufacturer in China is larger scale. I email with them, I negotiate with them their prices. The thing that about going with a manufacturer though is that they often have minimum order quantities, and if you're just starting out, doing it like a 100-piece run is probably going to be too expensive. And so when you are doing a business, any kind of business that requires you to have inventory on hand, inventory being like for me scarf product or face masks, you really have to learn how to balance inventory. You want to have enough to be able to sell product and not be sold out constantly, but you don't want to order too much that you have a bunch of inventory sitting around collecting dust and then you're losing money on it. So yeah, I mean, if you're starting out in textile design, I would use Contrado, or Spoonflower is another one. They're based in the US, and they have a much smaller range of fabric selection. I think it's like 20 different fabrics. The reason I don't use them is that they're currently, due to the whole COVID thing, running really behind schedule. I think it took over a month for my fabrics to come in, whereas Contrado, the turnaround time is like a week. Within 1 week, it's at my door. So just Google search textile production companies, and you'll get a lot of different like a lot of different like responses, and just kind of check out the different websites and see if it's your needs best.
So great, and I don't think, actually, I'm pretty much sure people are learning so much from this, AMA and all these questions. So before we go ahead, I think Mittal has that one question about, though this is not about selling on other platforms. This AMA is all about creating your own brand and starting your own business. But yeah, again, this question has been upvoted for like 10 times. So he's asking, what about Patternbank? It is not easy to get approval from Patternbank, and which things have to keep in our mind before submitting. So have you ever tried such platforms?
No, actually, I don't go that route for a very specific reason. And that reason is that I really want to keep my brand in-house. So instead of having my products show up on these big marketplaces, where if you think about it, somebody who's in a big marketplace like Patternbank, they might see your pattern, they might like your pattern, but they won't necessarily know about you or your brand. And so what I really try to do is keep everything on my Mixed by Nasrin website and my social media accounts, and then really create a community in those places so that my brand stays really strong. And also, those big marketplaces, again, they're big, and so you might spend a lot of time and energy trying to get into those places and be unsuccessful. And that, one, is really discouraging, but two, it's taking your time away from building your own brand and creating your own platform. Of course, I understand like the benefits and kind of the draw to being in those big marketplaces, but I think when you're starting out, it's much better, and it just feels better to create your own community and develop the brand, or develop the community around the brand.
Yeah, so yeah, that's very true. So that is why I think everybody's here to don't get into the hassles of all these websites and creating something on their own, starting something on their own. So my next question from you is you know how to balance the creative side of a business and remain consistent.
Yeah, that's a great question. So one thing that's I like a quote that I heard that I think is so true is that if you want to be a designer, if you want to design products or design clothes, don't start a business, right? You should start a business because you want to start a business, not because you want to design. Because the reality is that when you do start a business, so much of your time is going to go into actually operating the business. What that means is dealing with finances, dealing with inventories, customer service, marketing. I mean, I went from designing a pattern every day to having maybe 1 or 2 days a week, if that, being able to really sit down and design a pattern, because so much of my time is spent elsewhere. For me, I love that. I love business. I love the creative and the more business side of things. And so for me, it really works out. But if you're really like a true designer, not true, but like if you're a designer through and through and you don't really want to deal with numbers and you don't really want to deal with business, but you want to start a brand, what I would suggest is maybe partnering up with somebody who really does enjoy the business side of things. That way you can use your strengths, you know, where like just play to your strengths, right? Because if you're constantly, you're a designer and you don't want to deal with numbers, but you have to, you're going to end up getting really frustrated and burnt out, etc. So the way I deal with it, I mean, you know, it's not clean cut. It's still very messy. I don't have a very specific like weekly schedule. But what I do try to do is like in the early morning when my mind is most fresh, I work on a pattern because it's a good way for me just to start the day. And then after that, I'll spend the rest of my day doing social media marketing, customer service, upkeeping the website, things like that. But it's hard. I mean, every day I have like an existential crisis and I'm like, oh my God, this is so hard. What am I doing? And it's kind of lonely too, because no one's invested in the business like you are, because you're the only one running it. And so you will get tired and you will have days where you're like, I'm not doing anything today. And that's fine. And I have those days and you just got to keep going. The point is the long run, not 5 months from now, not a year from now, but where will the business be in 5 years from now? So you got to go slow and steady.
So that's very realistic actually, and you know the way you share it, like it's not a cakewalk, guys. You know, if you have this, you know, that's why I said it in the first place. You know, it's very courageous to take this step and you know doing things on your own, and even if you take help from anybody, you know, you are responsible for that thing. You know, for it's kind of like your baby when you start. So
Yeah.
you gotta be available 24 hours to it, like Nasreen mentioned, like you know, customer service to everything, and you feel like we feel like you know in 9 to 5 job we are like you know all over the place, so just imagine being available for everything 24 hours. So yeah,
Yeah.
you gotta be strong.
Sorry, last night it was like 3 a.m. or something, and I was like trying to go to sleep, but I had all these thoughts in my mind, and then I was like, oh man, like I didn't respond to this one customer's email. So basically, what had happened was like this customer, I ship from the U.S., but I do international orders, and so she lives in Canada, and she emailed me saying like, hey, you know, my order, it's been a month since I placed my order, and it looks like the package has not left the U.S. yet. And so basically the USPS shipping service, just for whatever reason, like they didn't ship the order, like they didn't take it to Canada. I don't even know why. So frustrating. But it's like 3 a.m. and I'm like, oh my God, I have to respond to her. So I'm like writing this email in my bed. I'm like really tired. I just want to go to sleep. But, you know, trying to offer her the best service I can, giving her a refund, reshipping the package at no cost. So you're really on 24 hours, but you also have to find a way to turn it off and just to like let it go and take a rest. Otherwise you'll just burn out.
So yeah, I totally get you, you know, your point. So moving on to next question is, you know, how to build brand recognition with your patterns?
Yeah. So when you think about brand recognition from an aesthetic standpoint or a visual standpoint, it's basically just having a similar look visually. So for me, you can really tell what my patterns look like based on the color, like the really vibrant colors that I use, and also the forms. So I use a lot forms and subjects. So I use a lot of kind of like nature elements in my patterns. I use a lot of kind of flowy but still geometric shapes. And so having these kind of consistent elements across all your patterns will help to create like a brand look. Now with mixed, part of the idea of mixed is that there's not just one look, there's many different looks. And so not all my patterns look the same. And so that's why it's a little bit harder to create that brand, because I have to work 10 times harder to not just make everything look the same, but allow things to look different and unique, but still exist under one brand. And a lot of that comes not just visually, but through the writing and your caption. So that's another thing I'll add, especially for Instagram. I know it's very image heavy, and obviously the image is extremely important, but when you post a pattern, try like in the caption writing a little bit about that pattern, talking about either the design elements of it or what inspired it. And that that context is also going to help create that brand identity for the people who are seeing it. And you have to be consistent with it. It can't just be like a one-off thing.
So yeah, that's totally apt the way made us understood all these things. So Katina has one great question, through which we all go through is like, how do you act in a creative block? Like how do you get out of the creative rut when you're stuck and you don't able to think what to do next?
Yeah, sorry, I'm getting my charger. Creative block. I mean, I just take a break essentially. I try not to force it. I usually get really frustrated with myself. I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I suck. And always what it takes is just a break. It comes and goes, and you really can't force it. What you should do though is create anyways. Make something you don't like and continue practicing every day, because getting into the skill of just practicing and showing up every single day, not getting it perfect every day, but just doing it every day is really going to improve your skills. It's going to improve your ability to face failure or frustrated feelings. So when you have a creative block, my suggestion is to create anyways, even if it's something you don't like, and get that practice in every day. I'm gonna put my charger in just 1 second. Okay, I'm back. Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. So so my next, are you ready?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. So my next question is, can you tell us a negative experience which taught you a lot as in this industry?
Yeah. Any kind of negative experience?
Yeah, like in the industry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. Here's one. So actually, my first ever client, I was working on a book, and I was designing the interior and the cover for this book. And at first, the client was giving me a lot of creative control. He would kind of give me these concepts, or I would read the book, and then from there create the design concepts, and then bring it to him. And he usually would really like it. We'd give some feedback, etc. When I started working on the cover design, it was something that was like just more precious to him, and so what he started to do is kind of tell me exactly how he wanted the cover to look like. So he would say like, make this blue, put this here, put this there. And I'm sure everyone kind of understands what I'm talking about, having a client that's like really, over your head, that doesn't really give you creative freedom. And so I was getting frustrated because in my mind, it's, I'm thinking, well, if you know exactly what you want, then save your money. Don't pay a designer to do it, and either do it yourself or just have someone else who knows how to use the program do it for you. And basically he was, I'm not saying anything bad about the client. You'll see at the end what my takeaway was, but he's telling me exactly how to create the cover. It was something I really didn't like personally. It wasn't my style. It wasn't what I wanted my name to be attached to. And so I kind of let my emotions get the best of me in that moment when we were on a call and he was telling me how to design the cover. And I just said, hey, I want you to have a cover design that you like. And that's really important to me. I also want to make sure that I'm doing work that I believe in. And if this is the design of the cover you want to go with, and I don't want my name to be on the book. And so in retrospect, looking back on it, it was too harsh. I understood where I came from. I understood where the client came from, and they're both really valid places. What I could have done is waited, not mention that on the call, and given it some more thought about how I wanted to approach a client that wanted to give me really specific directions. And if you are in that position, right, where you have a client that doesn't give you creative freedom, you have to make the decision of what's important to you. Is it important just to get money from the project? Because I get that. Sometimes that's what's important. Got to pay the bills. Or do you want to stick to your creative identity and your creative integrity? And if that's the case, sometimes you do have to walk away from a project if it's not the right fit. So I guess the other lesson is like, make sure that your client is a good fit for you. Don't just accept any client because they want to work with you, but really make sure that you're going to be able to service them and they're going to be a good partner for you.
So yeah, actually, this is I think you should always keep in mind as an artist because uh, it's both ways. So yeah, let's not anybody overpower you like that. So I hope you guys took all the notes, and thank you so much, Nasreen, as we are coming to the end of this session, and we still have so many questions pending. So there's this one question which has got five upvotes, and which is, I think, as people who are trying to be in this industry and make a career out of it. So I think this is the question that comes into everybody's mind and heart. So this question is from Gabriela. She's asking, 1 year after you first started building your brand, do you have an enough income as a full-time job?
Great question. So the brand actually only it's 2 months old, so it's very new. I started designing about a year ago. And the reason why, great question, Gabriella, I was able to go into design full time was because I actually saved a lot of money beforehand. So before I was a middle school teacher, I taught 7th grade history and English in New York City, and so it wasn't like a fancy job, and I wasn't making a ton of money. But I'm really frugal. It's the Iranian side of me. And so I was able to save enough money and to basically be comfortable without working for about a year or more. And because I had that runway, it made me not have to worry about getting clients. And I could kind of just really practice design and my creative work as freely as I wanted to. That was a huge help, and without that money and that runway, I don't think I would have been able to produce the kind of work that I did. So what I would suggest is to make sure you save enough money beforehand. Let's say I didn't save money. Does my business create enough money for me to have full-time income? No. It's not there yet. It just started. And oftentimes it takes many years for businesses to become profitable. So definitely, if you want to start a business, you want to have your own money, to be able to invest in it. You can also take money from investors and start the business that way. But I think it's kind of better just to start with your own money so you really have full control over the business.
Yeah, so that is a very realistic approach towards it, because you cannot just we all have to think through things before opting for any option like that. So
Yeah.
I hope you guys have enjoyed this session and it was really helpful to you, and the kind of comments we're getting, it's kind of really helpful to you. And as we are in the end of this webinar, I think we've got 2-3 minutes more. Uh, to end this session. So is there any great piece of advice, or any your favorite piece of advice as an artist which you want to share with all of us?
Ooh, that's a big question. I think, yeah, okay. So I think my greatest piece of advice is that your creative process is really tied to who you are as an individual. And instead of worrying about selling your work or getting clients, start first with creating work that is really aligned to who you are, that really reflects who you are, and that allow your design process to help you discover more about yourself. So what does that mean? When you're creating a pattern or an illustration or a design, that's a piece of you that's coming out visually. It's kind of crazy. And so what can you learn about yourself from that? And how can you express yourself? And, just like, how can you just make your art and your design and your self understanding one process? I know that's a little bit abstract, but I think that when you really are true to your process, your work will look unique. And then eventually it will be a lot easier to create a brand off that, or if you wanted to create a business or sell prints or whatever you want to do. But it first has to start from a really authentic and honest place.
That's pretty much a great advice, and the whole session was so insightful. So, guys, I hope you all enjoyed a lot. And once again, thank you so much, Nasreen, for
Yeah.
doing this with us. And I hope for those of you, who watched it in the starting and didn't have the time to watch the full session, you will get the recording, and of course, we'll upload it on our YouTube channel as well, so you can see it there also. So, once again, thank you so much, Nasreen, for joining us today. It was such a fab session, and we hope to be in touch with each other and make this community a great place for artists
Yeah.
and for people in general. So
Thank
thank you so much, guys. Also, you have been so lovely, and you asked such great questions, which it made us happy, and we were really looking forward to answers to all of your questions. But I think we were short in time, so of course we'll try to do it again. So
Yeah.
thank you so much, and thank you, Nasreen. See you guys later, like in our upcoming event. So stay tuned. Okay, then see you. Bye, guys. Bye, Nasreen. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Thanks so much for tuning in, everyone.
Yeah, see you. See you all.
How do I exit? See.